Hello again and welcome back to our course on Access 2013 Advanced. In the previous section we looked at some of the tools and techniques for packaging your application. And we finished off by looking at using the runtime option as one pretty straightforward way of protecting your database from users, and in fact to some extent protecting users from your database as well. So this is the student database running in runtime mode, and one of the significant things here is that there is a very limited amount that the user can do. Basically they're restricted to the buttons that are on this main switchboard form. You may choose to provide a main switchboard, you may choose to provide an interface in terms of a navigation form with a tabbed type of interface, but the important thing is that the user can only do the things that are on this form. We've even removed the close button from the form itself, so in order to close the form you've got a close form button here on the interface, and you've got a quit button that, subject to confirmation by the user, allows the user to quit the application altogether. Something else that can sometimes be an issue for users, particularly where you've got a large number of users, is when you get a call perhaps with a particular problem, you may say to the user, can you just tell me which version of the database you're using? They may look at this sort of switchboard and say, well, it says version 1.20. You may not want to hard code that sort of thing onto the main switchboard itself, but that's the sort of thing that you can include in an about form such as this one, similar to the about or help facilities you have in larger scale software. So a form pops up where you can give useful information. This has even got a copyright notice on it, but you can do things like put a version number on there, and that can pick up the information in turn from one of the tables, a sort of application settings table for example, within the database itself. One of the things that we've done at various points in the course is to put in message boxes where we're dealing with suspected error conditions or whether we're asking for confirmation or whatever. So for instance, if a user clicks on this quit button here, they get this request to confirm that they want to exit the database. You should always try to put in your own message boxes for error conditions or confirmations. It's even a good idea to put some sort of reference numbering system on these, so that if somebody phones you up and says, I'm using your student database and I keep getting this error message, you can say to them, okay, what number is on the error message? That will enable you to really narrow in on what the particular problem is that that user is having. Things like getting used to using on error resume next and then dealing with the error codes for the things that happen. It's a particularly good practice for you to get used to. As an alternative in some situations to using message boxes, and something that we haven't had time to cover on this course, you can display messages in the status bar at the bottom of the window there. Apart from giving information about status as static text, you can also use standard features within Access 2013 to put things like progress meters within the status bar to show the progress of certain operations that take quite a long time. In terms of usability itself, there are many factors to consider. One of them is that you may even have different versions of the interface for different users, because some users may only be able to do certain things. For instance, you may allow some users just to browse the list of movies in the movie database and not do maintenance on the movies. With other users, they may have full access and be able to maintain all the information about the movies. Other specific interface features, such as the show hide fields feature that we built in here, again can be extremely useful for users in giving them a good opportunity to control what they see, the kind of information that they maintain. It's also, as I mentioned before, a good principle to generally remove standard close buttons, maximize, minimize buttons wherever you can and should, in preference for using more targeted interface buttons, so that you can make sure, for instance, when you need to close a form, that any actions that need to be performed when you do close that form are actually carried out. And finally, just one other point. In terms of a user's impression of your database application, visually they'll be very driven by how consistent in look and feel it is. It's a good idea to adopt a theme and styles, fonts, etc., and stick to those throughout. If you use the theme and styles approach, then you'll generally find it easier to both maintain consistency and also to change the style if you need to in a consistent way later on. If you have a number of forms, each with a different color scheme, different font, different size text and so on, your database immediately looks a little bit sort of haphazard. It looks as though it's not really been thought through carefully. So try to be consistent. Even with these two forms, the movie list and the movie details form, you can see how although the font is consistent and the size of the text is pretty consistent, you can see differences in the color scheme, and you can see the effect of having a dialogue with a standard thick dialogue box compared to a form which is basically a non-pop-up form. So it's almost as important to make the interface look good as to be functionally well designed. So that's pretty much it as far as Access 2013 desktop databases are concerned on this course. We're going to spend the rest of the time looking at Access 2013 web apps. However, I've got one last exercise for you to do. My answer to it is example 15, and it's pretty straightforward. All I want you to do is to do the same job on the movie database that we did on the student database. So I want you to suppress the navigation pane, suppress the ability to use the F11 key, for example, and suppress the ribbon. And make sure all the startup options are set correctly so that when a user opens the movie database, all they get is the switchboard. They'll use that to quit, and other than that they can click on movies, look at the movies, click on actors, look at the actors, and that's it. If you're feeling really ambitious, you might want to design, put together and add an about form. There isn't an about form in example 15, but there's an extra exercise for you to do. And if you're feeling even more ambitious than that, you might want to look at the option of making the add actor to movie form work a little bit more effectively and efficiently. But that's it now. In the next section we're going to move on and look at web apps. I'll see you then.